Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today I want to talk about some books that I've read that, for one reason or another, have stuck in my brain in a way where I think about them all the time, which is quite a feat because, to be honest, I'm not great at remembering the books that I read, but every once in a while something will burrow its way into my brain and stay there. Now, I did a video last year, I think, where I talked about books that blew my mind, and those books I do also think about quite a lot, but I've tried to pick different ones for this video so it's not just the same thing. And the ones that I've chosen for this are like books that will pop up in my brain when I'm just going about my everyday life, and for some reason I just think about these books quite a lot. But I do also think about the books in that other video, at least a lot of them, regularly, so if you want to hear about them you can watch that video. You might think that these books just automatically correspond to my favorite books, and some of them do, but some of them don't. Sometimes I will remember a book just because of a specific scene or a character or something like that, and I will say I have only included books that I actually liked. I do have some books that I think about regularly because I didn't like them. I think about why I didn't like them, but we're in a positive space here, so we're just gonna talk about the good. I'm sure my choices will be different in like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, or maybe even in just a few months. But for now, these are books that I've just noticed that I regularly think about when I'm going about my everyday life. I probably don't need to explain this very much more, so we're just gonna get into it. But I will say I have only picked fiction books for this, and I do have non-fiction books that I also think about a lot, so if you want that kind of video, let me know. But let's get into the books for today. The first one I have is Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami. This book is set in Tokyo, and it follows a woman in her 30s who one day is at a bar and she runs into her old high school teacher, and the story is all about them continuing to meet and developing a friendship, which then develops into something else. This is one of those books where it's one of my all-time favorites, but it's very quiet and very unassuming, so I know it's not for everyone, but I just love it. I read this quite a few years ago now. I don't really remember. I should reread it. But I read it and I remember I just absolutely fell in love with this book. I don't know what it is about this one, to be honest, because nothing really happens in here. It's just about the characters, and they're going to different places and eating all of this different food. And I'm wondering if it's the food that I like latched onto because I love reading about food. And it felt very like real to me, and I'm wondering if maybe the reason that I think about this book all the time is just because of the food, because I also love food. It is a weird book, and I do think another reason I liked it so much, aside from the food, is that it is about unlikely friendship in a way and sort of unlikely romance. And I think that there is like an intimacy to this that has really stuck with me. Secondly, we have another quite strange book. It's I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is not the longest book, but it definitely made an impact on me. It's about this young woman who lives in a cage imprisoned with 39 other women, and they are constantly being watched over by these guards who never speak to them, and they don't know what they're doing there or how they got there. Like, none of them remember, and only some of them have like memories of life before, but our main character doesn't because she's the youngest one who is in this cage, so this is kind of all she knows. Then one day an alarm goes off, and this changes everything for these women. Now, I think the reason that this has stuck with me is that what is going on in this book is sort of shrouded in mystery, and it stays that way, so we don't really get a lot of answers to what's going on or what it means, or really any answers to anything. And sometimes when I read books like that, I find it really annoying because I just want to know, like, what is going on. But in this one, that really worked for me, and I think that's why I keep thinking about it, because I keep thinking, like, what does it mean, and what really happened, and like, where was this? And there's so many questions that I actually really enjoy thinking about, and I don't know why that worked in this book and it doesn't work for me in some other books, but yeah, I just really think about this book a lot. I do also feel like I have a very vivid mental image of what everything in this book looks like, and that's also why it keeps popping up in my brain. Next, we have one that is actually one of my favorite books. It is maybe the favorite book. It is, of course, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one follows a group of eccentric students at this elite New England college, and they are all misfits, and they study under this particular professor, and the story is all about what happens when they turn on one of their own. I think the reason that I think about this all the time is in part because I love it, and in part because it is a character study in a lot of ways, and the characters in here are very interesting. And I just think about the characters a lot. Maybe specifically like Henry and Bunny and Richard. Like those are the characters in here that pop up the most. Maybe in recent years, mostly Richard, because I don't think I realized the first time I read this book that Richard, who is the one who's telling the story in here, is not really reliable. So I will think a lot about what he may be lying about and just what it means. For some reason, I just think about it a lot. I also think about Henry a lot because he's an interesting character. I think also I just think about this book a lot because I've read it 4 or 5 times now, so I just know it really well. And that may be one of the reasons that I remember so much from this book because I've read it so many times. But I just think it's a very interesting story, and the characters in here are like, they're mostly terrible people, but they're just fascinating. On to something with a totally different vibe. We have Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen. And look at me being able to squeeze this book into a video that is not autumn related. I feel like when autumn rolls around, I will not shut up about this book because it really is perfect for that season and I just keep talking about it. But I managed to squeeze it in here as well. This is a graphic novel and it tells the story of Garlic, who is a very anxious little bulb of a person, and she lives in a village of vegetable folk, and she's pretty happy there. But then one day a vampire moves into the neighborhood, and that freaks everyone out, and they decide that someone needs to go check this vampire out, and they decide that Garlic should go because she has like some natural protection, I guess. And even though she's very scared, she decides to go on this adventure. This is one of the most comforting reads that I've ever read, and I remember the first time I read this book, I was having kind of a terrible day, and this really cheered me up. So actually, the reason that I think about this book a lot is because if I'm having a bad day or like a bad moment, I will think about this book and like I can conjure up this whole story in my head and it makes me feel better. Like it makes me feel like things are not so bad. Like it's this book and like videos of small animals that can really cheer me up. Next, we have one where there is a particular scene in this book that for some reason I just keep thinking about. It's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This is a historical fiction book with some fantasy and horror elements to it. It's set in 1970, and we meet this 15-year-old girl who has gotten pregnant, and so she's sent away to this home for wayward girls to have her baby away from everyone she knows. And when she gets there, she of course meets all of these other girls who are in the same position as her. They're monitored all day, every day. It's a very controlling environment, and the girls have like no say in anything really. And then one day, a traveling librarian comes by and gives the main character a book about witchcraft, and this may afford them some like power and autonomy, but of course, nothing is ever free. I thought in general this was a very interesting book, and it has a lot of interesting themes and discussions, so occasionally I will just think about this book because of that. But the main thing that pops up in my head from this book is a particular scene and like why this scene stuck with me out of everything that happens in this book. Like there's some stuff in here that's pretty gruesome, and the thing that stuck out to me is not one of those things. It is a particular scene where there are these witches in some trees that are like watching the house that the girls are in, and for some reason, like just thinking about it really makes me shudder. Like it really creeped me out. Maybe it doesn't sound that creepy, but that part in the book is just like a little thing just really stuck out with me. I have a very like clear mental image of what that looks like, and it's just so creepy. So for some reason, like at least once a week, I will think about it. I'll be like, oh, that was creepy. This next one is sort of the same situation as with the Garlic book in that I will never shut up about this book. It's Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This is my favorite book by this author, and it's like fantasy with a little bit of horror to it, and it follows this woman who has to save her sister from her terrible marriage, and to do that she decides to go on this quest, and she recruits the help of a grave witch, a fairy godmother, and a former knight, and off they go to find the sister and save her. Now, a thing that I think this author does really well is that she blends humor with more like dark elements in her stories, and my favorite way that this humor shows up is the way that it shows up in this book in the form of a chicken who is like a side character, and the chicken is possessed by a demon, and for some reason I just like, it just tickles me so much, and I just think about the chicken a lot because I just think it's really funny. Then we have this excellent book. This is Fresh Water for Flowers by Valérie Perrin, and I always feel like this book is so difficult to summarize because I feel like the summary doesn't do this book justice. But the story follows this caretaker at a cemetery, and we basically follow her for a pretty big part of her life. We see some of her past and some of her life in the cemetery, which is generally quite routine, but sometimes that routine is disrupted. For example, by a man who comes there to deposit his mother's ashes on a stranger's grave. I feel like this is a little bit of the same situation as with The Secret History, in that the reason that I think about this book so much is because I just think it's really, really good, and the characters really stick out to me in this, and again, sometimes I have like mental images of things that really stick with me, and this like house in the cemetery where the main character lives and the little garden and everything, I just love that image, and that makes me think about this quite a lot. It sort of feels like the life that I would like to have. Like, I would like to live in a place like that. And I think I just think about this book a lot because it's excellent and I'm kind of in love with it. Next, we have something with a little bit of a different vibe. It's this book, which I have in Norwegian. It's called Utregning av Romfang by Solvej Balle, but this has been translated into English, and the English title is On the Calculation of Volume. This is a contemporary literary fiction novel with a little bit of like sci-fi to it, in the form that our main character gets stuck in a time loop. So she keeps reliving the same day over and over, but she's the only one who's stuck and she's the only one who's aware. And the story, I think the reason that it stuck with me is that it feels very like everyday, and it doesn't feel very dramatic. It's just interesting and kind of sad in a way. And a thing that I think about a lot in this book is that the main character, as more days pass for her but for no one else, she keeps like aging, and she can tell that she's progressing in time in a different way than everyone else, and so everyone else stays the same but she changes, and I just think that's a very interesting thing, and for some reason that just has really stuck with me. I have read some other books where there are time loops, but it's not done in the way that this is, and I think the fact that it feels very like everyday life had a bigger impact on me. I think the idea of being stuck in time but you as a person is like moving through time in a different way is just very interesting, and I just think about it a lot. I do need to read the sequel to this, which I have, but I still haven't read, and I'm very intrigued as to what happens in the second book, because where are we going? I don't know, but I'm very interested. Moving on, we have one of my favorite classics. It's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I should take this off actually, so you can see the beautiful cover. But I keep saying that I should reread this book, and I think the reason that I keep saying it is because I keep thinking about this book, and that makes me think, oh yeah, I should reread this. And I don't remember when I read this the first time. It's a number of years ago now, but this is one of my favorite classics ever, and I just think it's so good. I think the thing that sticks with me in this book is the perspective of the monster. So this book is constructed in a way where we see different perspectives. So we first see the perspective of a ship captain, then Dr. Frankenstein, then the monster, then we go back to Dr. Frankenstein, and we end with the ship captain again. So it's kind of like an onion with a lot of layers. But the thing that I remember the most is the perspective of the monster. And it's just so sad because he is trying to figure out how to live, and all he really wants is like have some friends, and it's so sad, but it's so good. And that part of the story is also super atmospheric, like where he's at, and it just it's so freaking good. And I need to reread this, and I'm sure I'm gonna love it just as much on a reread. And yeah, I just love it so much. It is heartbreaking, but it's so good. Speaking of friends, this next one has stuck with me because of the friendship that we see in this book. It's Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce. This is set in 1950, and we meet a school teacher who one day just gets absolutely fed up. She realizes that she is just surviving and she's not actually living, and she decides that she's gonna chase her dream, which is to find this golden beetle on the other side of the world, which may not even exist, but she wants to prove its existence. And so she wants to go on this adventure, but she can't go alone, so she recruits the help of a sort of assistant, and she recruits a woman who turns out to be very different than what she had imagined. But by the time they meet, it's too late to do anything about it, so off they go. The friendship between the two women in here is what really did it for me in this one. It's an unlikely friendship because the characters are so different from each other, but it does feel like a genuine friendship, and the characters feel like real people, and the way that they come together, I just loved. Like, I feel like this friendship of these characters like live in my heart, and I think about it a lot. I think in part also because finding books about female friendship, it's very difficult, but female friendship is a thing that I think about a lot in life in general, and it's like I have a lot of women friends and I absolutely love them and I appreciate them a lot, and I just think female friendship is like the best thing in the world. And I just love this one so much, and because of that, I think about it a lot. I also think that when I think about it, characters are usually the thing that stick with me the most from books. I think that's why I love reading about characters so much. I very often say that when I review books, that like characters is usually what does it for me, and this is a great example of that. It's the same for this one actually, but in this one there is a side character that has really stuck with me. This is This Green and Pleasant Land by Ayisha Malik, and the main story in here is about a man whose mother is dying, and her dying wish is for her son to build a mosque in their small British village. And he sets off to do this because it's his mother's dying wish, and this gets some reactions from the people in the village and also actually within his own family. This is very much a story of identity and family and community, and I feel like this is such an underrated book, and I really want more people to read it, not only because I think it's a really good book, but also because there is a side character in this book. There is an aunt that we meet in here that technically isn't like a big part of the book, but for some reason, I just loved her. I think, like, when I think about her, I almost feel like I'm thinking of a real person. And I just love her so much, and I think everyone should read this book just so you get to meet her because she's amazing and I love her. Again with the characters, next we have A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne, but in this one we actually have a character that you don't love, you hate him because he is the most unlikable character that I've ever read about, I think. But I think the reason that I think about this book a lot is because I feel like this is a great example of how to write a truly unlikable character in a way where the character is still fascinating and you want to keep reading about him. I think if you don't like reading about unlikable characters, you're not going to like this one, but if you do, this is like a great example of how well it can be done. We follow a man named Maurice in here who is handsome and charming but completely devoid of talent, but he craves fame. And what do you do if you want to become a famous author but you can't write? You steal other people's ideas and other people's writing. This guy is terrible, but he's so interesting to read about. Next, we have another dystopian book. It's The Book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Elison, which again I feel like is kind of underrated. This is set in a post-apocalyptic world where this fever has killed off most people, and it's killed off more women and children than men, so there are very few people left, and like very, very few of them are women, and there are like no children. And the main character that we're following is a midwife who may be the last midwife left on Earth, and the story is all about her traveling around, and she disguises herself as a man to protect herself. This book is incredibly desolate, and sometimes when I read books like this, where a lot of people have died, you don't really get the sense of it because there are still a lot of people left, but in this one, like really, there are very, very few people left. And there is a scene in this book that really drives that point home, and it's that the main character comes into contact with these two people who live together, and when she leaves them, the book says something like they lived out the rest of their days without seeing another human being. And that just really stuck with me because it felt so dark and horrible, and it just really made me feel like this world was totally like lost and broken, and like everyone has basically died and all hope is lost. Second to last in my stack, we are back with a book about friendship. It's Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukigawa, and this one follows a man who works in a dorayaki shop, and he is kind of down in life, and then one day this elderly woman comes into the shop and offers to make the bean paste for the dorayaki, and through that this unlikely friendship blossoms. It's an incredibly sweet book, but it's also a little bit sad, and I think the thing that has stuck with me the most about this is not only the unlikely friendship, but in particular this older woman, because I feel like I have such a clear image of who she is and what kind of person she is, and I just love her so much. Again, she feels like a real person, and I think about this book a lot in general because I think it's a very sweet and nice little book, but it's also a little sad, and it has some depth to it that I think is maybe the reason that I think about it a lot. Then at the very end, we have one where I might be cheating a little bit. It's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I probably don't need to explain this book very much, but this is my favorite Jane Austen, and I think about this book a lot because I think about the movie adaptation of this a lot, the one from 2005, and in particular, the hand scene in that book lives in my brain rent-free. If you know, you know. And whenever I think about that, that makes me think about the book and how I need to reread it. So maybe it's a little bit of a stretch because I'm like thinking about it via a movie, but yeah, I really need to reread this book and I love it a lot. So yeah, here we are. Maybe this year will be the year. I was gonna reread it last year because it was like a Jane Austen anniversary of some kind, but then I didn't, but yeah. Maybe this year is the year. Those were all of the books that I had to show you today, though, and of course there are a lot of other books that I also think about, but really whenever I remember anything from a book, it's really a testament usually to how much I liked that book, because very often when I read a book and I close it and it's done, it will be totally lost from my brain. I can always remember how a book made me feel if it made me feel anything, but don't ask me about the plot or like names or anything in any books ever because I don't really know. Except maybe in The Secret History, but even though I've reread that like several times, even in that, I can't remember everything. Anyways, I would love to know what books live in your brain rent-free and which ones you think about all the time. And as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!